How can I reduce stigma around personal challenges without lowering standards? You've seen it before. A valued team member starts struggling. They're distracted, they're missing a few deadlines, or they're starting to ask for some flexibility. You want to be supportive, but there's a fear in the back of your mind. If I make an exception here, what message does that send? If I show empathy, will others think standards don't matter? If I acknowledge someone's personal stress, will everyone expect special treatment? That tension between empathy and accountability is exactly where stigma lives. Most leaders want to do the right thing, but they also want to protect performance, and that's what makes this topic a little tricky. If we haven't met, I'm Dr. Anna Thomas. I'm a physician, leadership speaker, caregiver advocate, and corporate wellness specialist. I help organizations strengthen their workforce and create workplaces where people and performance can thrive together. Even as we enter an era of AI, automation, and agentic teams, the future of work is still human, and that work is changing dramatically. But at the same time, employees are navigating complex personal and professional pressures that are only going to escalate in the coming years. For example, in the next 5, 10, 15 years, we will see an exponential increase in the number of older adults who will need caregiving support. Who will be providing that care? Working adults. Right now, 63 million Americans are caregivers. That's 1 in 4 adults, with more than half of them currently working full-time. Those numbers are expected to increase and will have a tremendous impact on our communities and, yes, even our workplaces. And caregiving is just one example of a personal stressor that will impact the workplace. Mental health, chronic illness, stress, and burnout are all on the rise, and the organizations that will thrive are those that lead with care, culture, awareness, resources, and empowerment. Care. Through this series, I share practical strategies, leadership tools, and insights to help you create cultures that support well-being, strengthen engagement, and retain top talent. If you'd like a clear starting point, then check out my free training, The Future of Work is Care. The link is below. And while you're there, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this with another leader who is ready to build a workplace that cares. Let's get into today's topic. In today's episode, we're tackling a challenge that many leaders face, but they rarely admit out loud. How do you reduce stigma around personal challenges without lowering standards? Because here's the truth. People don't stop being human when they start working, but the fear of being judged for what is what drives silence, disengagement, and turnover. Let's look at how this plays out in real workplaces. First, you have the unspoken rule. Too often employees hear this message, not in words, but in tone. Leave your problems at home. And that sounds fair in theory, but in practice, it's impossible. People are carrying invisible loads every day. Caregiving, chronic health issues, anxiety, grief, and pretending that those things don't exist doesn't make them go away. What it does is create fear. Fear of being seen as less reliable. Fear of being passed over. Fear that honesty equals weakness. And that fear keeps stigma alive. Then you have the false trade-off. Some leaders think they have to choose, be compassionate or maintain standards. But great leadership is never either or. It's both and. When done right, care doesn't mean compromise. It means recalibrating expectations while preserving excellence. For example, if someone is going through a major life stressor, maybe caring for a family member, or they're recovering from a major illness themselves, you can say, let's realign your priorities and responsibilities for the next 30 or 60 days. Here's what matters most. Here's what can wait. That conversation protects output and energy. It's not softening of standards. It's just a strategic adjustment that keeps people engaged instead of exhausted. 3 is the myth of fairness. Another source of stigma is the belief that fairness means treating everyone exactly the same. But true fairness means giving people what they need to succeed. Leaders who cling to rigid one-size-fits-all expectations often lose their best people, not because those employees lacked ability, but because the culture lacked flexibility. Equity, not sameness, is what sustains performance. 4 is the culture shift. Reducing stigma starts with leadership modeling. When leaders acknowledge that real life happens and that the company will work with the employees rather than use it against them, it sets the tone for the entire organization. Here's what that can sound like. We expect excellence here, and we also recognize that life happens. When challenges arise, our goal isn't to lower standards, it's to find a path that works for both the person and the team. That kind of transparency doesn't make people lazy, it'll make them loyal. Let's talk about the practical framework. So how do you build this balance into your culture? First of all, you have to normalize the conversation. Include well-being and personal capacity questions in surveys and check-ins. Train your managers to respond consistently. Equip them to handle disclosures with empathy and accountability. And embed flexibility into your systems. Make care structural, not an optional, but a structural element. And recognize resilience publicly. When employees navigate hardship and they still contribute meaningfully, acknowledge that strength. Recognize it. The more visible and systematic this becomes, the less stigma has room to hide. So what's the performance payoff? Sometimes leaders worry, if I do this, will productivity drop? But studies show the opposite. When employees feel safe, acknowledging real-life pressures, their engagement increases, turnover drops, and trust strengthens. Teams become more adaptive, not less. But when people don't have to pretend, they perform well. So here's what I want you to remember. Reducing stigma isn't about lowering expectations. It's about leading with emotional intelligence, creating conditions where people can bring their full capacity to work, even when life gets messy. It's about replacing fear with fairness, silence with trust, and pressure with purpose. If you're ready to build a culture that values both people and performance, then start with my free training, The Future of Work is Care. It will give you the framework, the language, and the systems to lead with care without losing accountability, and the link is in the description below. And if you haven't yet, check out my book, Workplaces That Care. It is your playbook for building a human-centered workplace culture that sustains well-being and results. Here's a question I want to leave you with. Does your culture reward perfection or resilience? Because if one breeds fear, the other builds trust. In the next video, we're going to talk about, are employee support policies fair to everyone or just special treatment? We'll explore how to balance flexibility and equity and consistency in a modern workforce. Remember, even as we enter this era of AI, the future of work is still human. So let's create workplaces that care together.